they bought themselves time by this deal. I think, they can address a much bigger need in the first round, whether it's corner, whether it's a
Don't say
linebacker, an edge
guard.
rusher. I
Don't
was
say
going to say
guard.
whether it's tackle looking ahead or whether it's guard, they
Tackle.
can address that need.
Don't say guard.
I'm not against taking wide receiver high. You mentioned value. I look at it. If Parker pans out, he's under contract through 2023. They have their big outside receiver. Jacoby Myers is a pending free agent. And if Jacoby Myers catches 85, 90 passes again, he's going to get paid. Like, he's going to get a big, fat contract. And I don't think it's going to be here. I look at Sky Moore in the second round, John Mechie in the second or third round,
Right.
Bo Melton later. Like, I'm looking at, I think they should take a wide receiver this year. I want to get the slot guy. Go get the slot wide receiver who's going to learn from, and by the way, they don't have any depth behind Jacoby either. So they need somebody to back him up. I guess maybe Christian Wilkerson, but not really. Go get
Yeah.
the slot guy this year. That guy backs up Jacoby. He takes over next year. And then next year, you do the same thing on the outside. Next year, you take the outside guy who will have a year behind Parker, and then you go from there. So, if they take Jameson Williams 21, great pick. Excellent pick. But I'm more interested in slot guy on day 2, maybe early on day 3. Like, that to me is the sweet spot for wide receiver for them in this draft. I think, Sky Moore in the second round would be great. I think all things considered, if they can get John Mechie end of the second, I think it's probably ultimately going to be end of the second. I think they either have to take him at 54 or move up to get him. I don't think they're getting him at 85. But if they can figure out a way to get John Mechie in the second round, that, like, all things considered, is the perfect wide receiver pick for me in this draft. I'm all about that one.
I think it's perfect for them too because they don't need to rush him back from the ACL.
That's
And
yeah.
they don't necessarily need him to contribute this year coming off the injury. So it's really a pick
Right.
for 2023 and beyond. I love the Mechie combo as well. But what I want to talk about is the value of this. And this is the pitch. If you're one of those people that wanted to draft a wide receiver beyond just the fact that you want the shiny new toy, you think the offense needs it, you think you need to keep up with the arms race. The biggest thing is that, and the easiest way to describe this is two doors, right? Door number one in the NFL right now to get an elite wide receiver talent on your roster is at a bare minimum, you got to pay the guy $23 million a year. On average, that's what the elite wide receivers are making per season, $23 million, which right now, until they have to pay Mac Jones, would be the most expensive player on the Patriots roster, right? If they were to add a guy like that at the top of the roster. The other thing that you have to do there is that those guys, the true number one elite guys, they don't hit free agency. They don't get into unrestricted free agency. So you have to trade for them. You have to trade a first and a second round pick for Devontae Adams. You have to trade 5 picks for Tyreek Hill. You have to pay draft capital and investment in dollars and real contract dollars for that player. That's door number one. Door number two is you can overpay for guys that are good but not great in free agency. Nelson Aguilar, Christian Kirk, 29-year-old Allen Robinson for $20 million a year. That's the other option. And the Patriots, quite frankly, have been more into that, trying to find the best value in that door right now, right? Aguilar, Bourne, Parker, that's kind of where they've been living. Door number 3 is that the best non-quarterback bang for your buck right now in the NFL is a wide receiver on a rookie contract, a productive wide receiver on a rookie contract. Those guys are making a fraction of what they are truly valued at on the open market. And it's not just guys at the top of the draft, because I think that's where this sort of gets skewed, is that you look at it and you say, okay, well, obviously if the Patriots could draft in the top 5 and get a Jamar Chase level talent at wide receiver, then that's a great return on investment. But if you even look at where the Patriots are drafting at 21, that's right in the range of CeeDee Lamb. That's right in the range of Justin Jefferson a few years before that. Those guys are such tremendous value on their rookie contracts that you don't necessarily need to pay the $23 million to have that number one production. So in a lot of ways, just like we talk about, the Patriots have this great thing going with Mac Jones on his rookie contract. The other great thing that they could have going is a wide receiver on the rookie contract, because you're not going to get that elite level talent unless you go through door number 1, which is pay through the nose for it in multiple ways, or you go through door number 3 and you invest a draft pick in it. You got to get it right. That's a big part of this. You got to get the pick right in the draft with any position. But that's the selling point. If you want to follow the money and you look at what the surplus value is in drafting wide receivers early in the draft, it's tremendous because those guys that produce over 1,000 yards are getting paid $15+ million a year, and you're getting them for 5. And that's tremendous value. So if you're Bill Belichick and you're sitting there and you're saying, well, I'm never going to go through door number 1. I'm not going to pay 5 picks and $30 million for Tyreek Hill. And I'm not disagreeing with that. Like, I think that's probably not the best way to go. But if you're never going to go through door number 1, the only way that you're going to get that level of comparable talent is to go through door number 3. And if you keep on just ignoring the draft at the wide receiver position, you are never going to get the guy. I'm not necessarily saying that they have to take a guy at 21. But I do think that they need to take a guy with a premium pick. And you mentioned that, okay, you have DeVante Parker under contract for next year. That's your outside guy. Sure. The inside guys are a little bit more murky. Nelson Aguilar, inside, outside, whatever you want to call him, free agent. Jacoby Myers, unrestricted free agent. You still have Kendrick Bourne on a contract. So no matter what, when you look at it from a long-term prism as well, you're going to need to add a wide receiver here in the next 2 years on this team.
You need to add 2.
Yeah, at least. You have, in all likelihood, you're probably trading or getting rid of N'Keal Harry. Gunnar Olszewski is gone. So you only have 4 wide receivers on the roster anyway. There's a spot for one anyways in this year's draft class. I understand the reservations. I understand they have other needs. But I think when you look at it across the board, you have to get, at some point, the Patriots have to get a young wide receiver, a productive guy on a rookie. Like, how many of these guys are going to come into the NFL through the draft before they get one of their own, right? It's just crazy to look across the league at how many of these guys have coming in. And I think the biggest thing for the Patriots when it comes to wide receivers, and this is the end of my rant here, isn't necessarily that they don't know how to evaluate wide receivers. It's that they don't actually try that hard to draft wide receivers. Because if you look at the teams that are the best at this, the Steelers, teams like that, they also have great investment at the position. So at some point in time, you have to invest in that position in order to get something out of it. And if you just keep on looking for 7th round guys like Trey Nixon or looking for UDFAs like Jacoby Myers, you're not going to be able to ever get where you need to go. And that's the game nowadays. Do you want to trade the capital that the Raiders or the Dolphins gave up for their guy? Or do you want to take a stab at 21 on Chris Olave and hope that he turns into your guy? I mean, those are the 2 options that you have. My guess is that Bill Belichick probably thinks that wide receivers don't matter to a degree and thinks that all of it's overrated. But I do think that in today's game, you need to keep up a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. And again, it's some of it's the way the board falls too, right? Just because you take a wide receiver in the first round doesn't mean he's going to be that guy.
Right.
And I don't know, with the momentum they built last year, I don't know that this team can afford another N'Keal Harry situation where they can afford to miss. So let's say they like Olave, they like Williams. Those guys are gone. Should they force Jahan Dotson if they don't believe in him just to get that guy? Like no, that's again where I think
that's the benefit of the DeVante Parker trade to me is that if you're not 100% convinced that the guy that you are thinking about taking is going to pan out for you, and I know you're never 100% convinced, but you know what I mean. If you're not really confident about it, now they don't have to reach on a wide receiver because they have enough NFL talent on the roster to not have to reach. But if Jameson Williams is there, if Chris Olave is there, if you get into the second round and you're on the clock at 54 and Sky Moore is there, or you feel great about John Mechie and his health and his evaluation, now you can find the right marriage between the board and what you're looking for and line those things up. But you got to take some stabs. Like, you can't just sit back and not do not do it at all. It doesn't have to be in the first round, but you've got to start to take some bites at the apple here.
So again, that's like, I agree with you, but there's a fine line between that and it's just forced, like, picking players for the sake of picking them without going off the
Right.
evaluation. That's why, again, and I think day 2, early on day 3 is the spot to go. And for all of their issues with receivers, big picture, they've been okay with slot guys. Granted, a lot of them were undrafted, but Edelman's, I guess,
Yeah.
his own thing, if you want to say that.
7.
But
Yeah.
they found Myers, they found Braxton Berrios, who's turned into a decent player, right? No, I don't say Edelman undrafted. Edelman was a quarterback, is what I meant.
Yeah. Oh,
But
Deion Branch in the second round is probably their best pick ever. Like, I know Edelman is their best wide receiver pick
well, I'm
just because of
just
where he
just
was
even
drafted. But
recently, I would say. I mean, would you say Braxton Berrios is a starting caliber slot receiver? I don't know that he's an All Pro, but
he's a slot receiver. Yeah, as slot
no. But
receiver,
would you
he's
say he's a top 32 slot receiver in the league?
probably yeah.
Right. Okay. So in the last 5 years, in the time we've been on the beat, they found 2 starting caliber slot receivers in Myers and Berrios. Right.
Yeah.
I trust if that's what they're going to do, I trust them more in the slot than I do on the outside. I like this slot draft, especially rounds 2, 3, 4. That's where I want to see him take the receiver. Go get an immediate day 1 playmaker or a potential franchise left tackle in the first round. Right. That's unless it's Penning, which I'd be into Penning. Unless it's Penning, based on who we think is going to be on the board, go get somebody who's going to be a factor year 1, week 1 in the first round. And then on day 2, go get the slot guy. That to me is
I like that
that's
plan
the
the best
picture.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just finding the sweet spot on the inside guy in day 2, I think is going to be a little bit difficult unless they're all in on Mechie, which I think we would all be fine with. He's really the best one there. I like Khalil Shakur from Boise State too. What my concern is with guys like Sky Moore and Khalil Shakur, who I think are both good players, Sky a little bit higher, obviously, than Khalil Shakur, is for them personally, not very good 3-cone testers, not very good agility testers in general. In the past, that role has always been like a 6'7" 3-cone guy, right? Like Julian Edelman, Welker, Amendola. I think Deion Branch probably ran a great 3-cone back in the day. So those 2 guys did not test particularly well in agility testing. So they're more vertical slot receivers as well. I don't know if they're necessarily the jitterbug types, but we talked about it earlier in the show, and maybe that's where they're going, right? Maybe they're going away from the true underneath jitterbug, and they're going into more of a vertical element in that role. So,
well, how about Wandale then?
I love Wandale. You know my concerns with Wandale. My concerns with Wandale is usage and length, right? He doesn't have long arms. He's got a really small catch radius. And early on in his career, and maybe if you're going to develop him behind Jacoby and you don't necessarily have to put him out on the field week 1, it will be a little bit better. But what does his role look like without a true offensive coordinator, right? Are they going to be able to use him properly before Troy Brown gets with him in the bag and gets his route running to where it needs to be for him to be a true slot? Where are they going to use him? How are they going to use him? That does, concern me a little bit, especially with their coaching staff.
I'm just like, because the other thing too, well, you've seen it outside of one pick in Kyle Duggar, they've been Rutgers, Alabama, Oklahoma. I mean, they're going for blue chippers, whereas that's kind of where I wonder if they'd have paused. Sky Moore, Western Michigan, Khalil Shakir, Boise State, Wandale Robinson, Kentucky, SEC, a good Kentucky team. Another thing, and this isn't just the Patriots, a lot of NFL teams do this. And it's something to watch leading up to this draft. When you see programs that aren't traditionally dominant, right? And Kentucky's not traditionally dominant in football. They're an SEC school. They're towards the bottom of the SEC. When you see programs that aren't traditionally dominant go on these 3 to 4 year runs where they suddenly get themselves on the map, a lot of times NFL teams will see that and see, okay, there's a player or players in that class that sparked this, both on the field and off the field, because a lot of that is culture too, right? And Kentucky's coming off a pretty successful 3-year run here. And there's a lot of Kentucky guys in this draft that make sense for the Patriots. Wandale, Darian Kennard, Josh Pascal, Yusuf Corker. There's a ton of I know there's more, but anyway,
From Kentucky, yeah,
Kentucky's
Marquand McCall too. You got
Marquand McCall. Thank you.
Yeah,
Kentucky's one of these schools where they were kind of a basement team, the SEC. In the last 3 years, they really got it going. And
they
I
kind
think
of remind me of UNC in the ACC a little bit, where like they have so much NFL talent, but they haven't necessarily hit that stride in terms of being a ranked team.
That's
But
because they didn't have a quarterback.
have
They're a
so much
pass-heavy
NFL
offense without a
talent.
quarterback.
They
Where's
got
Sam Howell supposed to go again? Thank you.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. But just like
I
that UNC team like 2 years ago, Adami Brown and the running backs, and like that team was
right.
absolutely loaded with NFL talent. This Kentucky team feels kind of the same.
They really do. But again, it's that this year's class that's coming out established that, right?
Yeah,
Somebody brought up Cincinnati. Cincinnati's another really good one.
yeah,
Cincinnati's coming to the end of this
really
run.
well
Obviously, they're the
coached.
first
Yeah,
right non-power 5 school. Like that's a 3-year run that pops out compared to what Cincinnati normally is. So teams are going to look at that and say there's something about the class that came in 3 years ago that's special. I'm trying to think of other examples that are on some of those runs. Like I can think going back, like the Chip Kelly Oregon teams, right? Like those players shot up draft boards because there was just something about culture during that window that teams wanted to be a part of. Honestly, I think Oklahoma. I think you're going to see the number of draft picks from Oklahoma after this year plummet because that program is going through a monster shift right now. So I don't remember why I started on this, but it's just something to watch when you
yeah.
you can go through. If I'm missing one, like mention it in the chat. Maybe I missed it. Somebody brought it up. If there's a program that's not a traditional powerhouse that is on the back end of like a 3 to 4 year like run, teams are gonna look at that. And there's players that maybe would be like late day 3 picks that move up into the middle of that round, or maybe 3rd round picks that move up into the 2nd round, or things like that, because teams want to tap into whatever that recruiting class did to help elevate that program.
By the way, in the chat, we took Christian Watson in our mock draft on Thursday, and our guy D22 wasn't there. He didn't see us take his guy. Come on. I see people in the chat talking about Christian Watson. We talked about him a lot on Thursday. We drafted him in the 2nd round.
Yeah,
I like Christian Watson too. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll give you 2 more of these programs that are on rises right now because I just pulled up the top 23 actually that I remember. Oklahoma State. I think it's a really big year for Oklahoma State guys in the draft.
They've had some good
Houston,
NFL players before this too.
they have, but they kind of went through a lull a couple of
Yeah.
years ago, and they're kind of back now. Houston.
Oh yeah.
Houston had a great run.
We
the
haven't
last
talked
4
about
years.
Marcus Jones much on the pod yet, but we will.
Marcus Jones, Taylor
Yeah.
Hall, like that. Even to Eric King, who ultimately transferred coming out of Miami, and he met with the Patriots. Houston just had a massive culture shift. They were, a fringe mid-major team, not mid-major, group of 5 team. They're now moving to the Big 12. They just had a great run. The other one, Evan, you're going to laugh at me, and this is maybe more next year than this year, but there's a couple guys from this team in this draft. Coastal Carolina.
No. Well,
Isaiah
Coastal's a
Likely,
lot of fun to
Jeffrey
me
Gunther.
I love watching Coastal now. This is sort of something that I like to do a little bit in the off season, is watch teams whose schemes are just way ahead of the curve in college. Because more so when they had McDaniels, but even now, they'll probably dip into some of those college offenses to try to pull some things. It's not like they're going to reinvent their whole offense around a team like Coastal, but Coastal's scheme, wide open, zone run based, obviously, but a lot of the things that they do at Coastal is all the trends, right? Like that's like what all the nerds want everybody to do is what Coastal's already doing. They're really ahead of the curve type of team and type of program. It's a really fun team, especially on offense, to watch them play.
So again, what I'm saying, and I know we're kind of off the rails here, but this is what we like. This is the best content on the show. When we get into like the theory of how teams are built or how schemes are built, I think that's when we're really in our bag on this show. So there's, I think 3 coastal. I'm trying to pull it up. There's 3 Coastal players in the draft this year. Isaiah Likely, who's a local kid, by the way. Jeffrey Gunter, who's a day 3 edge rusher. And I can't pronounce his name. They have a wide receiver who's supposed to go in the 7th round. Next year, dude, Grayson McCall should be a top 5 quarterback off the board. Anyway, my point being, Coastal was an FCS program not that long ago. And they had in 2020 the game against BYU, Mormons versus Mullets. They got on the precipice of the college football playoff. They had another great year this year. If I'm an NFL team, I look at that program who went from nothing to becoming one of the most, must-watch programs in college football. And those guys love playing there. You can tell. They love playing there. They love playing for the coach, all that. I look at what happened there and think, I want some of that in my locker room. How do I grab a guy who enjoys playing football and has that much buy-in? How do I get somebody with that mental makeup in my locker room? Like, I think Coastal, man, that's going to become like, they're going to have a little blip here as a little bit of an NFL factory, I think, for the next couple of years. And then we'll see what happens.
Thanks for watching our coverage of the 6-time Super Bowl champion New England Patriots. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Patriots Press Pass, for a lot more exclusive content on the Patriots right here on CLNSmedia.com.